Hello, welcome back to Norwich Talk. For a match reaction, Norwich City have just beaten Coventry 4-2 away from home in a game that was chaotic, confusing, but an absolute pleasure to watch. We all said and we all heard David Wagner's style of football was going to be heavy metal. I think that game maybe sums up the definition of using the term heavy metal in football. That was a championship classic. That was a game where, as a neutral, you couldn't ask for much more. As a Norwich City and Coventry City fans, you could probably say, right, can we calm it down a little bit because it's not good for the old blood pressure. Goodness me, what a game. A really, really fascinating watch. As a Norwich City fan myself, relieved, but also impressed at that game, at that performance, at that result. For Coventry, they put up a good fight. They played some really good football at times. But pardon me, I'm glad Norwich City have left and will be returning home with all 3 points because, in my eyes, at the very least, I do think we deserve to win. Um, Going into the game, the 11 was always going to remain unchanged, bar injury. It stayed the same. And let's talk about the first 20 minutes. Norwich City were electrifying in terms of the way they were playing. It's not revolutionary stuff, really, with Norwich. I think David Wagner has very much kind of just gone, well, let's do what you used to do, but maybe a little bit better. Now, the little bit better part, I'm sure we'll really see later down the line. But those players are playing like a group who have rediscovered an ability, not necessarily picked up a new one. They've rediscovered the kind of form and the kind of performance levels that they could reach under previous management. The style of passing, I mean, it's so forward, it's so aggressive, it's so penetrative, which is such a joy to watch from this Norwich team after 14 months of just watching basically nothing, a bit of hoofball now and again. To see Norwich playing that kind of football with, Gabriel Sara, who hopefully long term for Norwich City will be a very good player at the sort of wheel, controlling the game. Kenny McLean wasn't the best today, but also you can kind of see this important role he'll play. Kieran Dow, really, really good today. Onel Hernandez as well. I'm just picking names out, and if I was to carry on, I'd end up picking the whole team out. Let's get some negative stuff out of the way first. I think this kind of performance, this kind of result, will humble Norwich. I think it will be almost a good thing for David Wagner to look, or to show his players, look, we've progressed in these first few games, but also there's plenty of things that we need to work on. As it is important for Norwich City to attack, to score goals, it's also important to do the basics right and to make sure you don't concede silly goals. Norwich City today gave the ball away quite sloppily many a time. But in this sort of infant position we sit in under this David Wagner era, with David Wagner at the wheel, there you go, you kind of have to just sort of think, and we don't have to, but I do think, well, do you know what? I'm quite happy to have a few of those maybe dodgy passes, but also the stunning football, the brave attacks, the penetrative attacks, because before, as I said, it was nothing. We couldn't do anything up the other end of the pitch. We couldn't do anything down our end of the pitch. It was a whole load of nothingness, whereas at the moment we seem to have the extreme of both aspects of football, attacking and defending. Attacking so far has been brilliant under David Wagner. Defending has been a little bit shaky. Today wasn't too bad against Preston. Obviously, we kept a clean sheet against Blackburn in David Wagner's first game. Wasn't the worst either. But yeah, you look at today, and I think it will be sort of a good source material for him to pick out different aspects of the game that Norwich City can improve. But going back to the positives from today, players like Timu Puki, who really should have scored, didn't score, but still was as effective. And you look at him on the pitch and think, right, we know what you're doing. You're a striker and you haven't scored, but hang on a minute, you're still having a really positive impact on the game. Josh Sargent as well. Josh Sargent on the ball, I think, is a really, really good player. Really, really good player. There are so many times where he'll have the ball drilled into his feet. His first touch is usually pretty clean, pretty good, and he's really good at holding the ball up. There are times in the game where he'll sort of fade out and be a little bit clumsy, but on the whole, I think Josh Sargent is going to really, really thrive under David Wagner. You look at that first half as a whole, Norwich City could have had 5 or 6, possibly should have had 5 goals in that half. arguably they could have conceded more. Tim Krul's passing still dodgy. It kind of really does feel like 18-19 Norwich, in a way, dare I say it, in the sense of we've got this explosive, dynamic football, if you will, but on the back foot we're still a bit shaky, we're still a bit clumsy. Tim Krul, again, you're kind of looking at him as the person where, right, we want to build moves from the back. Let's start being consistent with our passes, but it's harsh to just pick out Tim Krul. Everyone had a go today. Janulis, I don't think, had a particularly great half, which is why, I think, anyway, he came off and McCallum came on and was decent. Didn't really make a mess of anything, which is why you didn't notice the left back position. Coventry's number 17, by the way, really, really good player. I mean, Sky Sports were wetting themselves, weren't they, throughout the commentary? But he was a really good player, a really, really good player. Player I'd like to see in this Norwich team, not necessarily to replace anyone, but just his strength, his footballing intelligence, was really good. And I do apologise for not knowing his name, but I'm a Norwich fan. Doesn't really matter, does it? The second half, I think David Wagner will be quite pleased with the way Norwich City played, in terms of, after that end-to-end first half, it was kind of, we do something, you do something. The second half, for me, there were a couple of Coventry chances, but I never really, after the first 10-15 minutes, I never felt in danger as a Norwich fan that Norwich were going to concede their lead. They dominated the ball, they kept playing, but it wasn't quite as fast paced. It felt more controlled, which I thought was quite impressive. And it's nice to see that the Norwich players have that in the tank. And in the same way that we would criticise, or we have in the past criticised managers at halftime for certain team talks, you have to praise David Wagner for the halftime team talk. Where I think maybe the message was, look, we've got the quality advantage. Let's just calm it down. Let's control the ball. A bit more. But yeah, in terms of the bigger picture, things are going pretty decent at the moment. And the one thing I do want to take away from this is the perfect game for David Wagner to unpack with his players, because it's got a bit of look how good we can be, but it's also got a bit of look what we need to not do, to then go and kick on as a football club, whether that's finishing in the playoffs and getting promoted this season that way, whether it's finishing the playoffs and not getting promoted and then kicking on next season, a bit like a Farker first season, if you will, where it's the manager implementing his own style, putting his own touch on things, and then kicking on the next season. We don't have to worry about that at the moment. Let's just think about what we're seeing in front of us. But as I said, I do think this game is the perfect sort of chance for Wagner to sit down and just really sort of pass on more of his seemingly wonderful messages. So far, the next game for Norwich, I believe, is Burnley, isn't it? Look at me checking my phone during the video. Yeah, Burnley. Because the game against Birmingham was moved, of course, because of their progression in the FA Cup. Norwich beat Burnley. I'm not going to go into that game and expect Norwich to win, but compared to how I was feeling about it under Dean Smith, I'm sure it's the same for you, I'm a lot more optimistic. It'll be a really good test for Norwich to maybe see where they're at in terms of quality. Burnley have been magnificent this season, so, rather than shy away from the game, I'd like to see Norwich go and just take it to them, which I think they will. And, with some of the sort of mistakes they were making today, you think a team like Burnley will take advantage more and more, but hey-ho, let's see what lessons are learned over the next couple of weeks. David Wagner, again, where he's not had much time to prep, will have lots of time to pass messages along, to coach his players the way he really wants to. Your thoughts, I'd love to know them in the comments down below on what is, again, another just mad victory for Norwich City. Your man of the match as well. For me, I think I might say Timu Puki, which is kind of ironic, he didn't score. Maybe Kieran Dowell, both played really, really well. But yeah, they're my thoughts on the game. As I said, your thoughts in the comments down below. Thumbs up if you fancy it too. Subscribe as well if you fancy it. And I'll see you in the next one.